The calculus teacher pointed at the janitor as a joke in front of the class, but when the man quietly stepped up to the board and solved the problem better than anyone expected, it didn't just silence the room. It changed how the entire school saw him. It was fourth period on a Thursday at Lincoln High School in Springfield, Illinois. The kind of day where students stare at the clock more than the whiteboard. Mr. Harrison, the school's calculus teacher, had a reputation for being sharp-tongued, impatient, and quick with sarcasm. He wasn't exactly loved, but he wasn't hated either, just tolerated. The class felt dry. Equations crowded the whiteboard. The air carried a faint smell of eraser dust and worn-out sneakers. Phones were tucked under desks. Some students pretended to pay attention. Others gazed out the window. And then something happened that shifted the air like a sudden gust of wind. When Mr. Harrison scribbled another derivative on the board, a faint squeak came from the hallway. It was the janitor, sweeping the floor outside the classroom, his usual slow, steady rhythm. Harrison paused mid-sentence, glanced at the door, and flashed a half-smile. Without warning, he turned to the class and pointed toward the hallway. "Well, look who's here. Mr. Thompson, tell me, you think you can solve this one?" He tapped the board with the back of his marker, like he was issuing a game show challenge. Laughter broke out. Not a roar, but the kind that makes you shift in your seat because you're not sure if it's okay. Mr. Harrison smirked again. "Come on, Marcus. You always look like you've got something on your mind." Marcus Thompson, a 54-year-old janitor, stood in the hallway, mop in hand. He wore the same navy blue uniform he always cleaned in, faded, with a T embroidered on the chest pocket. He didn't flinch, didn't waver. He just looked into the room, then slowly walked in. The mop leaned against the wall. A few students sat up straighter. Some thought he'd say something clever and walk away, maybe crack a joke or just leave. But he didn't. Instead, Marcus walked to the front of the room. "Mind if I?" he asked calmly, pointing at the board. Harrison raised an eyebrow. "Be my guest." A few phones quietly slipped out of backpacks. One girl whispered, "Is he for real?" But no one stopped Marcus. He picked up the marker, looked at the equation, and paused, not out of hesitation, more like he was deep in thought, like someone reading a familiar map. He squinted slightly, then started writing. No flair, no theatrics, just deliberate strokes, line after line. The room fell into an eerie quiet. The only sounds were the marker on the board and the creak of a chair as someone leaned forward. Mr. Harrison crossed his arms, watching closely. His face didn't change, but his jaw tightened. Marcus broke the silence, his voice low and patient. "See, here's the thing with the chain rule. The trick is recognizing the inner function first. Once you isolate it, it gets a lot cleaner." He moved like he'd done this before, not just the problem, but the teaching. His tone wasn't showy or smug. He explained things simply, clearly, like he'd spent more time teaching than mopping floors. When he finished, he capped the marker and stepped back. The board was filled with precise, well-organized work. He turned to Harrison, then to the class. "That's one way to do it," he said, and for a moment, no one moved. A junior in the back whispered, "What? Did he get it right?" Mr. Harrison didn't say a word, not at first. His mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. The silence grew louder than any joke he could have made. Marcus nodded politely and walked back to the door, picked up his mop. No applause, no boasting, just quiet confidence, like he hadn't just turned the room upside down. But as Marcus reached for the chalk, no one expected what came next. No one moved. For a full 10 seconds, it felt like the class had been yanked out of a dream and thrown into something real. The kind of moment that doesn't belong in a high school classroom. Marcus, the janitor, as they'd always called him in passing, was halfway to the door when someone said it out loud. Wait, he just did that in his head? It was Ethan Carter, a senior in the front row, who usually didn't talk unless grades were involved. He wasn't joking. His eyes were wide, staring at the board again, like the answer might change if he blinked. Harrison finally spoke, his voice flat, almost annoyed. Well, he got it right. But his tone didn't carry its usual sarcasm. Something else slipped through, closer to confusion, or worse, discomfort. Marcus glanced back. Spent a lot of time with numbers. Long time ago, he said, then shrugged lightly. They never left. A few students laughed, not at him, but because the tension was breaking. Marcus didn't wait for a reply. He left, mop in hand, shoes squeaking softly down the hall, like nothing had happened, like he hadn't just solved a college-level problem in under 3 minutes, without even a calculator. That's when the phones came out. Someone had recorded the whole thing, Sophie Miller, a junior in the third row, and she was already editing the clip before the bell rang. By the time the bell rang, the hallway between classes was buzzing. It's all anyone could talk about. Did you see Mr. Thompson's face? Harrison looked like someone unplugged him. Where'd he learn that? I thought he just cleaned floors. By lunch, the video hit TikTok, then Instagram. It wasn't polished, just a shaky angle of Marcus's hands moving across the board, with a voice in the background whispering, "Yo, he's solving it." The caption read, "Our janitor just smoked the calculus teacher." Some laughed, some stared, but the noise kept growing. In the teacher's lounge, it wasn't much quieter. "You're telling me he solved a full chain rule derivative in his head?" asked Ms. Brooks, the physics teacher. She was mid-bite into her sandwich, but stopped chewing. "He did," muttered Mr. Walsh, the English teacher. "Didn't use notes, didn't even pause. It was like muscle memory." Harrison sat at the corner table, pretending to grade papers. He didn't say a word, but Principal Andrews said, "He's been here 6 years. No one ever mentioned he had an academic background." People shook their heads. No one really knew Marcus. He came in early, left late, floors always spotless. Light bulbs never burned out for more than a day. The man worked quietly, but now he wasn't just the guy behind the mop. In the hallway, a group of students waited by the janitor's closet, not to complain about a spill or ask for a broom. They just wanted to talk to him. One 12th grader clutching a geometry textbook asked, "You tutor, Mr. Thompson?" Marcus blinked. "Haven't in a long time. You should—" The kid cut in. "That was cool." Marcus chuckled, but it wasn't dismissive, just surprised. By third period the next day, Harrison's mood was different. He didn't crack jokes. He didn't call on random people. He taught, eyes fixed on the board, his voice quieter than usual. No one said it outright, but everyone noticed. After class, Ethan approached him. "Mr. Harrison, that thing with Mr. Thompson yesterday, he used the same method you showed us last week. The chain rule, right?" Harrison nodded once. "Right. Only he explained it better." Harrison didn't reply, but what really shook them wasn't the solution. It was what Marcus said after. Marcus Thompson didn't plan to make a scene. He never liked the spotlight, not since he was young. So when students started waiting by the janitor's closet just to talk, or when teachers gave him long looks in the halls, it threw him off balance. He kept his head down, stuck to his routine, refilling paper towels, fixing a leaky faucet in the boys' locker room, wiping down cafeteria tables. But he could feel the shift, the change in how people looked at him, like they were trying to fit him into a new picture they didn't know existed. It wasn't just curiosity. It was confusion, respect, maybe regret too. It made him uneasy. That day, Principal Andrews asked him to stop by the front office. He walked in, still in gloves, his uniform slightly damp from cleaning under the cafeteria sinks. He took off his cap out of respect. Andrews leaned forward in his chair, hands clasped. "Marcus, can I ask you something? You got a degree or engineering background?" Marcus hesitated, looked down for a second like he was brushing off an old part of himself he hadn't visited in years. "Went to Purdue," he said quietly. "Mechanical engineering, full ride." The principal leaned back, eyebrows up. "You're serious?" Marcus said, "Had plans." Things got complicated, and for the first time in a long time, he told a story he'd kept close. He grew up in Gary, Indiana. Smart kid. Always loved how things worked. Pulleys, engines, anything he could take apart and put back together. His mother, Clara, raised him and his two sisters alone. She worked overtime at a textile factory and still found time to read to them every night. She believed in education like it was the only way out. "Books first," she always said. "The world will try to shut the door, but if you bring your own key, they can't stop you." Marcus earned that key. Valedictorian, state science fair winner, then a scholarship to Purdue. His first year, he was already tutoring classmates. Professors saw his name on the roster and paid attention, but sophomore year, he got a call that changed everything. His mother collapsed at work. Doctors said late-stage cancer. By the time Marcus got to the hospital, she could barely stay awake. "I can handle it," she whispered. "Don't come home." He didn't listen. He took a semester off, then another. He got a job at a warehouse, worked night shifts at a grocery store, anything to pay the bills. Classes fell away. Sleep did too. By the time his mother passed, things were scattered. He had no home to go back to, no money to finish school, no advisor calling to ask why he didn't return. "Kept thinking I'd go back to school," Marcus told Andrews. But one thing turned into another. Life doesn't wait. The principal sat quiet. The story was heavy. Not dramatic, just real. The kind of life you never hear unless you ask. At home, Marcus kept his transcripts in a box under his bed, along with a worn Purdue sweatshirt an old calculator, and a photo of him and his mom on orientation day. He never touched it, but never threw it out. Now it was all being pulled into the light again. That evening, he sat on the back porch of his small apartment complex. The sky was dull, the kind of quiet where the only sound was the hum of distant traffic. He sipped tea from a metal thermos and stared ahead. He hadn't thought about calculus in years, not since that last tutoring gig he took before dropping out. And now, here it was again, like an old friend knocking at his door. But one decision can derail everything he'd worked so hard for. In college, Marcus had made a promise to himself. Take a short break, get his family back on track, then finish strong. But life doesn't follow plans, especially not the kind built on hope alone. After his mother's death, Marcus went back to Gary, trying to piece things together. His sisters were still in high school, barely making it. Bills piled up on the counter. The landlord demanded rent, and no one from Purdue called to ask where he'd gone. He took any job he could find: warehouse loader, mall janitor, overnight security at a shipping yard, anything that paid enough to keep the lights on. School drifted further and further into the rear view. At first, he called the university now and then, asking about reapplying, transferring credits. They sent forms. He filled them out, but never mailed them. Something always got in the way. And then came the breaking point. It was late November. A man named Henry Larson, owner of a flooring company in Peoria, offered Marcus a steady job, one he picked up fast. He said, "Don't waste time pushing brooms. I'll train you myself." Marcus felt hope again, a real shot. But the day before he was set to start, his younger sister, Elaine, got into a fight at school over some dumb argument that turned physical. She broke someone's nose. They threatened to expel her. Marcus had to be there. No one else showed up for her. So he missed his first day at the flooring job. Larson gave the spot to someone else, and that was it. A door that could have opened slammed shut. He stopped chasing dreams after that, started chasing stability. The years blurred together, city to city, job to job. He never had a record, never got in trouble, just quietly survived. By the time he landed in Springfield in his mid-40s, he wasn't looking for a fresh start, just a steady paycheck. The school district offered benefits. Summers were quiet. He took the janitor job without blinking. He liked it, in its own way, predictable, clean work. Students left him alone. Teachers smiled politely. He didn't expect friendship or connection. He didn't need it. He kept his head down, cleaned up messes, and was gone before the final bell. But the numbers never left him. Sometimes, passing a math class, he'd glance at the board, see a formula, and finish it in his head. It was like muscle memory, a part of him that stayed sharp even when everything else was buried under routine. He'd go home, cook a quiet dinner, fried fish, brown rice, maybe some carrots, and flip through an old engineering book he kept hidden behind a cereal box just to check if he still had it. He always did. He just never had a reason to show it, until Mr. Harrison called him out that day. And now everything was different. Not just at school, but inside him. He thought about the kids waiting outside his closet with questions. Thought about how Ethan Carter stopped by that morning with a folded sheet of paper and said, "Mr. Thompson, I tried that same problem. Can you check it for me?" And Marcus gently, carefully explained where Ethan went wrong without making him feel dumb. Ethan smiled when it clicked, not just out of pride, but because of the connection. That kind of thing stuck with you, but not everyone was thrilled. Harrison, for one, went quiet. Too quiet. Students noticed. Teachers noticed. Something about being shown up in front of his class by a man you never thought twice about. It rattled him. He didn't lash out, but his tone got shorter, his patience thinner. And when someone mentioned Marcus in the lounge, he changed the subject. He wasn't used to being outshined, especially by someone who'd been invisible to him until now, but life had another turn waiting. And this time, it circled back to math. The video didn't just spread through Lincoln High, it went beyond. It started small. A local student page reposted it with the caption, "When your janitor turns out smarter than your teacher." Then it hit a regional education forum. By the weekend, it crossed state lines. People online couldn't believe it. They weren't mocking Marcus. They were in awe. "Man broke it down cleaner than my college prof. Someone give this guy a class and a board." "Not the mop flex. You never know someone's story." By Monday morning, Marcus had no idea any of this was happening. He didn't do social media. Still had a flip phone. When he got to work, the first thing he did was fix a jammed paper towel dispenser in the girls' bathroom, like he always did on Mondays. But something was different. Teachers stopped their conversations as he passed. Students nodded, not out of duty, but with an odd kind of respect. Some even smiled, like they were seeing him for the first time. "Hey, Mr. Thompson," one girl called out as he passed the library. "You're kind of famous now." Marcus chuckled softly. "Don't believe everything you read." But as he turned the corner, Ethan Carter was waiting there with two other students. One held a calculus book, open to a problem highlighted in pink. "Could you go over this with us?" Ethan asked. Marcus looked around, unsure. "You got a free period?" "We made time." And just like that, in the middle of a hallway, lined with lockers and science fair posters, Marcus sat on the floor with three teenagers and walked them through a multivariable equation, step by step, line by line, not talking at them, but with them. It wasn't loud, wasn't flashy, but something meaningful was happening. Down the hall, someone recorded it. No one told Marcus. He wouldn't have liked it. In the office, Principal Andrews was on the phone with someone from the local school board. "Yes, that's right. Marcus Thompson's been with us 6 years. No, he's not a teacher. He's a custodian." He paused, listening. "Well, I wouldn't call it unconventional. I'd call it overlooked." Meanwhile, in the teacher's lounge, Harrison was reading an email forwarded by a parent, a link to the viral video. No comment, no subject, just the link and the phrase, "Thought you'd want to see this." He closed his laptop without watching it. That day, Andrews called Marcus back in, offered him a seat. Marcus stayed standing. "Got a request from the board," the principal said. "They want to know if you'd be interested in leading an after-school tutoring program. Small group, voluntary, just a trial run." Marcus didn't answer right away. "Of course. you'd be paid. Andrews added, "This isn't about replacing your current role, but adding to it something you clearly still have." Marcus looked at his hands, calloused, clean, worn. "Haven't taught in a long time." "You haven't stopped knowing," Andrews replied. Marcus looked up. There was no pressure in the man's voice, just a simple invitation. "I'll think about it." That evening, he pulled the old cardboard box from under his bed, the one with the Purdue sweatshirt, the transcripts, the orientation photo he hadn't touched in years. He spread it all out on the table. The paper had yellowed a bit, the edges curled, but the words were still there. And that was what mattered about knowledge. It didn't fade. He didn't need to go viral. Didn't care about views or comments, but knowing he could still make a difference, that pulled at something. But while some were amazed, others weren't so thrilled with his growing attention. The more attention Marcus got, the more the school started to shift. It started with the kids. They were the first to change. The ones who used to pass him in the halls without a second glance stopped to say good morning. A few even asked for homework help between classes. By the end of the second week, a small circle of students had unofficially formed what they called Thompson Sessions. They met in the library after school, notebooks open, heads bent, listening as Marcus explained concepts with a clarity no one expected, but everyone respected. Then came the teachers. Most were supportive. Miss Brooks from physics was the first to pop into the library and watch him work with the students. "You've got a gift," she said quietly. "And I don't just mean the numbers." But not everyone was thrilled. Mr. Harrison hadn't said a word about Marcus since the day it all went down. In the teacher's lounge, he acted like nothing had changed, but the bitterness was clear in his silence. He spoke in clipped sentences. He never looked Marcus in the eye. He never brought up calculus. When a parent-teacher meeting brought up Marcus's growing influence on students, Harrison said, "It's great they're interested in math. Let's just try not to blur the line between teaching and inspiration." It sounded polite on the surface, but the tone behind it, everyone heard it. The principal didn't let it slide. He pulled Harrison into his office one morning and laid it out plain. "I know this stung," Andrews said, "but Marcus didn't embarrass you. He inspired them." Harrison shifted in his seat. "He's unqualified. He's educated more than we realized. And what's more, he's reaching kids in a way none of us have." Harrison opened his mouth, then closed it. There was really nothing to say. Meanwhile, Marcus stuck to his routine. He didn't ask for a title, didn't want special treatment. But when the principal offered a modest stipend to keep the tutoring sessions going, he accepted. Not for the money, but because it felt right. He started carrying a small folder. Inside were pages of problems, blank sheets, notes he wrote by hand during breaks. He'd sit in the far corner of the cafeteria and jot down formulas from memory, occasionally nodding to a passing student who shouted, "Hey, mister, tea!" One afternoon, Sophie, the student who filmed the original clip, stopped him by the vending machine. "You ever want to be a teacher?" she asked. Marcus paused before answering. "I wanted to build things. Teach later, maybe. Life had other plans." "Well," she said, handing him a new mechanical pencil, "I think you're doing both now." He smiled. "Thanks. But behind all the good Tension was brewing. Some parents started calling the school. Most were supportive, but one anonymous complaint made it to the board. Is it appropriate for a janitor to work with students in a school setting? Is he certified? Has he been background checked for teaching? Andrews handled it quickly. He's a district employee. He's done nothing wrong. And if the concern was genuine, they'd have talked to me directly. He never told Marcus about the complaint, but Marcus felt something in the air anyway. Not resentment, but resistance, like some people didn't know how to place him now that he didn't blend into the background. Then one afternoon, Harrison did something no one expected. He walked into the library during one of Marcus's sessions, quietly watching from a distance as Marcus explained integrals to a group of 4 students. About 10 minutes in, he stepped forward. "Mind if I sit in?" Harrison asked. Marcus looked up, his expression unchanged, and nodded toward a chair. "Long as you don't mind learning something." The students laughed, just enough to ease the moment. For the first time, Harrison cracked a grin. It didn't mean they were buddies that day. They said little, but it was a start. But Marcus wasn't after titles. He had something else in mind. It wasn't about proving anything anymore. For Marcus Thompson, standing at the whiteboard in the library with students gathered around, it was never about redemption or revenge. He wasn't trying to impress anyone, wasn't trying to be remembered. He was just showing up for them, the kids, the ones who reminded him of the boy he used to be. Every Tuesday and Thursday, right after the final bell, the corner of the library filled with chatter, questions, scribbled notes, and wide eyes as Marcus helped students tackle math problems they used to fear. Not because he had all the answers, but because he made them believe they could find the answers themselves. That's what stuck. There was Isaiah, a freshman who nearly flunked algebra last semester, now solving quadratic equations without looking panicked. And Tasha, who used to hate math, now running mini sessions on weekends for her cousins, using Marcus's notes. He never stood at the front like a traditional teacher. He sat with them, talked to them, asked them questions before answering theirs. And slowly, more teachers started dropping by, not to monitor, but to see what he was doing. Ms. Brooks asked if she could borrow some of his explanations for her class. Mr. Rivera asked if Marcus would help set up a summer prep group for incoming freshmen. Even Harrison, hesitant, proud Harrison, started coming by regularly, not every day, but often enough. He'd quietly offer an extra problem or two, and eventually started offering words of encouragement to the kids. The edge in his voice dulled. Something in him softened. One day during a tutoring session, Harrison lingered after the students left. "You know," he said, staring at the board, "I used to think this job made me important. Teaching gave me power." Marcus didn't interrupt. "But you reminded me what it really means to show up, to make it count." Marcus just nodded. "We all get lost sometimes." He didn't hold grudges. He didn't need to. Principal Andrews called him in again a month later. On the desk was a proposal to formalize his sessions, turn them into an elective class next semester. Not for credit, but for enrichment, a bridge between students and their own confidence. "We'll have to jump through some hoops," Andrews warned. "But if you're willing," Marcus shook his head gently. "I appreciate it," he said, "but I don't need the title. I'd rather it stay simple. Let the kids come because they want to, Not because it's on a schedule. Andrews nodded. Then we'll support you however we can. Word spread beyond the school district. A local reporter stopped by for an interview. Marcus kept it brief. No dramatic story, no self-promotion. I'm just showing them what they've already got inside, he said. Sometimes it takes a while to see it. That spring, Lincoln High held its annual student showcase. There were science projects, art displays, choir performances, and in one corner of the gym, a booth called Thompson's Table, showcasing written reflections from students about math, life, and confidence. Dozens of students wrote about how Marcus helped them see more in themselves, not because he gave them answers, but because he listened and believed. By the end of the night, people weren't asking if he was the janitor anymore. They were saying, "That's Mr. Thompson. He didn't wear a suit. He didn't give speeches. He stood by the table, smiled, and thanked the students who showed up." Later that night, back at his apartment, he pulled the old Purdue sweatshirt from the box under his bed. He didn't put it on. He folded it, tucked it neatly into a new storage bin, and added the folder filled with student thank you notes beside it. Legacy, he realized, wasn't about titles, but about what you leave behind for others. He didn't need to finish school to teach. He didn't need a degree to lead. He just needed to show up every day and care. And that's exactly what he planned to keep doing. Thank you for hearing Marcus's story. If it moved you, if it reminded you of someone you've overlooked or someone who believed in you, share it with someone who needs it, because sometimes the greatest minds hide in the quietest places.